what are you trying to achieve in the opening? What are your goals in the opening? Okay, so the first thing that you should be thinking about is your fair share of the center. You want to control your opponent's got his ideas, you got your ideas, but you want your fair share of the center. That's point number one. Point number two, in the words of the Brits, you want to get the bits out. You want development. You want good squares for your pieces. You want to have harmonious development. Step number two. Step number three is you really want to save king. All other things being equal. And then if your king is safe, you're coming out of the opening, you should feel pretty good about what's happened so far. Number four, you don't want massive pawn weaknesses. If there's been trades, equal trades, that's fine. But you don't want to have a situation where your structure is decimated and the next thing you know, the whole game, all you're doing is defending weak squares, weak pawns, and there's no counterplay, nothing to do but seize the defensive, as we say. So once again, four things. Your fair share of the center, harmonious development, safe king, sound pawn structure. That's all you really want. After that, you just play chess. You just play chess. So in this game, we have the last round, and Chiang, Ben could probably correct me, she's one of the very, very few women, females, that have ever played in the U.S. Junior Championship. By far. It wasn't even, when I played in a number of U.S. Junior Championships from 1976 to 1979, and it wasn't even close. There wasn't a female within striking distance. There was just nobody who would even, you would consider putting in against these juniors. So Sarah's participation was really extraordinarily unique to begin with, and she was the lowest rated player in the field by far. That didn't mean that her games weren't competitive. Some were, not all of them. She lost some quite badly. One she absolutely should have won. I mean, she deserved a victory in one of her games, and I think she lost 8 and drew 1. So she went through the tournament with a half a point. In the last round, she has white, so she has a bad tournament, and she's anxious to, you know, salvage some pride or what have you. And she's playing against Sam Sevian, the youngest player in the tournament, and the kid is just playing tremendously. And he's got aspirations of winning the tournament. If he could win and certain results on the top boards go well, he could be the U.S. Junior Champion. So black has everything to play for. White, you know, wants to salvage her tournament. So she opens d4. I happen to be a queen pawn player, by the way. d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3. So the first things that we can say about these three opening moves from white is look good. Look good. You know, you're playing in the center, you're trying to control the center, and we can say in particular that the pawns on d4 and c4, white's occupying the center. Okay, black from his part has played restrained, knight f6, e6, these are the most popular moves. And now with this move, bishop b4, instead of let's say playing 4 and occupying the center with d5, black instead goes for the pin. Oops. So I did something wrong. Okay, like I said, just because the technology is advanced doesn't mean that I have. Bishop b4. Okay, so we have the Nimzovich defense. Bishop b4, pinning the knight to the king. I mean, white would, prior to this move, white's intention was to try to occupy the center with e4. So the move bishop b4 is aimed to prevent white from doing that.
One of the players just walked in.
Hey, Sam. Yeah. It's your game.
From the last guy.
You see, you inspire me. Ah. You sensed. I remember as a kid looking at this position, and I was saying to myself, the knight on f6, the bishop on b4, is aimed at preventing e4. Is that correct? The knight on f6 and the bishop on b4. But I was very contrarian, or maybe even stubborn, when I was a kid. And I was thinking to myself, why can't I play e4? Like, isn't that a kind of a cool move? So my analysis, I remember thinking about this, knight takes e4, queen g4. So I was thinking, gosh, with my threats to capture this pawn on g7, oops, excuse me, to capture this knight on e4, oops, I go, stop that. I thought the only move was knight takes c3. So I was very happy. What's new variation? Yeah, go. Okay, so far so good. I've lost a pawn, and frankly I've lost a knight, but in my mind's eye I was thinking that this threat on queen takes g7 was extremely powerful. So again, you know, I was just a kid, my analysis, I played a3. So what I was counting on is that I want to take black's bishop. If it was my turn, I would take black's bishop. But if you notice, the knight is then trapped. So not only would I win the piece I had sacrificed back, I've sacrificed a piece and a pawn. So in my mind's eye, I'm thinking that if it's my turn, I get to take the bishop, and then in the resulting position, the knight's trapped, I get to take it, so I would win two pieces. So again, you know, kind of like a kid, I'm thinking like, what can black do? I was thinking that black could, well, first of all, that's a good question. What's black's best move now? Any suggestions are more than welcome. What's black's best move?
Bishop back to f8.
Bishop back to f8, precisely. Bishop back to f8, precisely. That was the move I missed. Seriously, I must have spent, I don't want to say days, that's ridiculous, that's being over, but I'm saying I spent, you know, good. Bishop e7's a good move also, but simply bishop retreats. That hadn't occurred to me. I was thinking that black should play knight a2 check, which is a ridiculous move. I would take, he would take, I would take, and I'd be better because as soon as the rook moved to f8, then I would recapture, and I was, wow, white has everything and black has absolutely nothing. So it never really occurred to me that after a3, the only other retreat that was going through my mind was this one, bishop b4. Okay, so I figured, okay, if I take the knight, he would take recapture. And then I was thinking, well, gee, after b4, bishop goes back. I can always trap his bishop with this move, but in the meantime, I can take rook f8, bishop h6, queen e7, c5. So this was going to be my secret weapon. This is how I was going to beat players who played the Nimzo against me. I was going to sacrifice the pawn. And then some very dear friend of mine pointed out that, well, gee, Yaz, you know, I hate to burst your bubble, but after bishop f8, let's see, did I do that? No, I didn't do that right. After bishop f8, all you can do is win back the knight, and then you're a pawn down. So just a second. So after bishop f8, I'm a pawn down, and black can play, I don't care, d6. Knight, knight, and he's fine. And then Sam's move would be even a better choice than that, which is this. So, new main line. So the idea here is that, oops, Boy. Hey, stop that. So if I take a pawn, new variation, he would go bishop f6. I come back. I'm trying to trap this knight. Knight a4. So that didn't work. So in this position, takes, new main line, castles, bishop h6 doesn't win in exchange because of bishop f6 and pawn down. But this is the way I was taught, literally, to analyze openings, is to just question everything. If from the basic position of the Nimzo-Indian, black is trying to prevent white from playing e4, well, what would happen if I played e4? Why doesn't e4 work? By answering these questions before I got into tournament play, I didn't think about them at the board, right? They had been answered. But you know, you can imagine yourself sitting there at a tournament game and suddenly get a creative inspiration. Hey, why don't they play e4 in this position? Well, now I knew. Okay, so what Sarah did instead was played queen c2. Oh, pardon me, she played e3. Yes, e3, okay. That was the main move. Sam b6. So this is all common, known as the Rubinstein variation of the Nimzo, e3, knight ge2. Now Sarah made a very strange decision. Logically, what white has done is brought the knight on g1 to protect the knight on c3, so that if the bishop captured the knight on c3, white would recapture with the knight and not have to suffer a damaged pawn structure, which is how I started the lecture. What are the 4 things that you want from the opening? Okay, so everybody, I think the main line would be a3, and black has a critical choice. Does he want to give up the 2 bishops? Yes, no, maybe. Or does he want to retreat his bishop to, say, e7? Yes, no, maybe. But in any case, I do think that the move a2, a3 is critical. And earlier in the tournament, Sarah had played the move knight g3. Was this in her game with Daniel or Jeffrey? And got a bad position and lost. And Ben and I, after the game, had explained to her our perspectives that maybe white should play a3.
C5, after C5, D5, and A3.
Or a3. Just get in that move a3. Just put the question to the bishop. And so when she went into a deep thought, Ben and I were jokingly saying to each other, did she forget, you know, like our recommendation of a3? Okay, so now comes c5, d5, takes. So we'll start again here. So again, when I started the lecture, we talked about what you want to achieve from any opening, whether you're a beginner, grandmaster. Your fair share of the center, harmonious development for your pieces, safe king, and not a hopeless or terrible compromised pawn structure. So in a sense, if we take a look at white's position, there's some violations, okay? I don't think that the knight on c3, the knight on g3 are so harmonious. That's somehow a little bit of a violation. The king, definitely a violation. We're not castled. White should be very, very proud of her occupation of the center and her share of the center. And so far, her structure isn't compromised, which is okay. So some gives and some takeaways. All right, so we continue. Black, for his part, he's happy. Not a problem. Castles, safe king, e4. Rook e8. And now comes the crucial, well, a very critical moment in the game. Ben and I expected f3. Okay? So we were thinking that maybe Sarah had, very cleverly prepared this position, that although she's compromised her king's position, look at what she has in return. She has these beautiful, I call this the corral, right? So you think of a fence that is corralling the pony on f6, the pawns on e4, d5, f3, all stop that knight on f6 from moving. So white has occupied the center big time, safe center. Maybe in the future, this knight on g3 has a possibility to advance to f5. And in the meantime, king comes, rook slides over. We could castle by hand. So here we had actually Ben and I again.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
The double corral.
Double corral.
Off with the double corral, of the fact that his black structure, the triple corral here, coming from the A7.
A7.
Static here is a partial defense system, along with your white corral, which is operating too.
Yeah, this guy
There's
is.
no white bishop, so the king has got some latitude behind that barrier both ways.
Right.
It's
So
a wall, double wall. So
yeah. So the
she's
king.
free to kind of move about the cabin, maybe.
Right. So here, again, Ben and I were having this discussion as to maybe, Sarah really had prepared this really well and got something. Sam, by complete coincidence, the player of the black side, Sam Sevian, the silver medalist in the U.S. Junior Championship, is here. No doubts you expected f3. And your intention, I suppose, was to play d6 and so your intention in the game was after d6, bishop f4, knight f6 to d7 to sacrifice the pawn on d6. Yeah, I can imagine. One of the things that, starts to... Right, exactly. I was about to say, just be a little careful that this bishop over here doesn't hang, isn't left out to dry because of knight d7. So we'll go back for a moment. So we're going to imagine f3. We're going to imagine take. New main
D6 is fine.
Okay, but it will transpose in a moment. d6.
Bishop G5.
Okay, so bishop, but essentially this was the intention of black was to sacrifice this pawn on d6. So we'll just continue the line. Takes, queen, I suppose takes. And since you're attacking this pawn, whoops, that wasn't the move I wanted. I was going to defend it with something, well,
Next my knight is C4, knight C5, bishop F4.
okay, c4, knight c5. So it's a pawn sacrifice for quick development, and maybe black can look at this white king and say, you're compromised. So, cancel. I don't want to play that. So that was, let's say, the expected variation for yourself, and probably the expected variation for Ben and I. We thought that after f3, white might be on to something, and black might be under pressure thanks to white's occupation of the center. Instead, Sarah went for the gold, and when she first played this move, let's be fair to her, we were really impressed. We go, holy cow, queen f3, my goodness. That's a very strong move. White develops his queen, her queen, and if it's her turn, like a move like bishop g5 would simply be devastating because black's pawns are going to be doubled on f6. So our first impression of queen f3 was like, oh my gosh, Sam's in deep trouble. What on earth could he possibly do to save his bacon? Any ideas for black? How can black deal with what he's facing? It's clear that white just wants to play bishop g5 and, jump with her knight maybe to f5, bring her rook to e1, and white will have a domination of the center. So any ideas what black might do? Pardon me, please?
H6.
h6. Okay, this is a kind of This move, no, well, no, not at all. The move h6 is designed to stop the bishop on g5, and under normal circumstances, the move h6 would be fine. But from White's point of view, that would be great, because that would be a tempo, and that would mean that maybe White could develop her bishop to f4, and if Black were to play a move like d6, maybe bring. And we can see that White's developing her pieces, and even though her king is not the greatest, maybe White's intention is to solve it with h3, king g1, and king h2. And in the meantime, what is left is that White has a great occupation in the center. So we were thinking, holy cow, this sure looks strong for Sarah. And Sam came up with a very clever refutation. He actually took the knight, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and after the queen e7, it was sort of like eureka. Oh, obvious. Jeez. White loses her e4 pawn because of a trick of knight d2. Now the problem from White's point of view is if she simply allows the move knight takes e4, not only is she losing a pawn, she's losing any chances of any advantage. She would just lose a pawn and lose the game. So we saw that after bishop g5, knight takes e4, this pin is an illusion. And after bishop takes, oops, see, there's a reason why you'd like to be castled and you'd like to have a safe king in the opening, because you get forked. When you don't, you get forked. And this is what we thought, and we more or less kind of decided in our minds that at this point Sam had refuted Sarah's play. But then, you know, like we got sucked into this game. This game was like, started getting more and more interesting as we started questioning our what's going on. So we saw knight takes e4, bishop takes e7, here, 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 all very forcing play. Here, White is a pawn down. If you put a pawn on b2, White is very, very happy. She would no longer be a pawn down. In fact, she'd be in an ending where she'd stand considerably better. We started thinking, wait a minute, Black has issues. First of all, this knight on b8 can't come to c6, obviously. If Black has to play d6 and knight d7, well, that's going to cost him a tempo or two. Notice that Black's king is on the back rank and in a back rank mating situation. And we started thinking to ourselves, well, my goodness, what if Sarah played knight f5? Black Black has to move his rook. Rook e5 is the only move. And then we started thinking, well, the rook attacks the knight on e5, f5, so the king returns the attack, returns the favor. King f4, attacking the rook, defending the knight. f7, f6. So again, it was like one of those games that Ben and I couldn't turn away from. It just kept sucking us in and grabbing our attention. And we started thinking, well, does Sarah have enough compensation for a pawn? Clearly she has the better development, and now the whole game hinges on whether or not she can play rook h1 to e1. Okay? So if White plays this move, what on earth could Black do? Essentially, if you don't take this pawn, pardon me, this knight on b8 is a little stuck. Even when it goes to a6, notice that it's a little stuck, and that, you know, it could go to c7, but cancel. And there's ideas of d6 to stop the knight's further development. So we thought rook HE1, holy cow, black would play D6, knight takes D6, knight here. White has regained her pawn, and we liked white's position. That is to say, this pawn on D5 is the most important pawn on the board, and we thought that it would be black who has to equalize. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Ben said, well, wait a minute. How about winning a piece? How about the move?
G6 is the first.
Ah, sorry. Sam is going to correct me and say again, please, Sam?
G6.
G6 is a new variation. We did not look at the move G6.
I will look at it after the move.
You did. So how would the
D6.
oops, I'm sorry. That my pen, my stylus, just getting used to it. Knight D6,
Rook takes D5.
rook takes D5,
Rook E8 check.
check.
King G7.
Okay.
And white must play D7 because after knight B5 A6.
Wow. Knight B5, A6,
Depends
knight C7, check, and you're
Rook A6.
you got it. And so the back rank pin is broken. So let's go back for a second. Wow, that is a tricky, trappy variation. So G6, which during the game, our main variation that Ben and I had been looking at was G5, and we were just having a lot of fun. I'm telling you folks, this was a very enjoyable game to comment upon. But again, let's start with G6, knight D6, yes? Rook takes D5, rook E8,
King G7.
king G7.
And now it has to Rook E1 and Rook E7.
Wow. Okay, so rook E7 is your perpetual check, yes?
Rook E7, King H6. Okay. Right, that's second King G7 and D6. But King H5.
Sorry, you're getting mated. So you're saying that instead of getting mated, you would have to go back
Yeah, and it's true.
and then just simply...
Because knight is knight D6.
Exactly. So you're simply saying that that white has a perpetual check in the position. But you suggested another alternative for white. Sorry. You
Rook A1.
yes. New main line.
And black should play G5.
Not taking the knight.
Rook E7 or H.
Rook E7, king H6, rook H8, and
G5.
yes,
King F5.
yes.
Rook D5. King F6. King H5. And then Rook H7, Rook H4. That's that line.
Ah, yes, I remember this now. For those of you who thought that the checkmate was going to come in the corner, I got the surprise. Remember, in this line of play, white's king started on F3. So we had quite a dance to get to this position. That's very nice.
So black should play G5.
Rook E1, G5, oops, not takes, but G5 check. New main line. So white's king presumably,
Rook D6.
yes.
Rook D7.
Pause, pause, pause. King H5, F5, correct? Okay, so sorry, how does it go? Check?
Rook E7, King H6.
Yes?
Rook H8.
Yes? So we're threatening maiden too. F5 check,
Well, F5 King F5.
and then rook D5 check.
King F6 and transpose.
Oh, it transposes. Okay, so how do you avoid the transposition? Ah, you play king here.
No, Rook G. Ah, okay, yeah. This is a different perpetual.
This is the other perpetual line, yeah?
But black's test a bit harder. That's true.
Okay, yeah, black's tax is a little harder. Now let's just go back here for a moment, because this is all... there was something about this game that had a very natural flow. Like everything that black did seemed real good. Like he's won a pawn, and you know, if he's just got the right tempi to consolidate, which actually happened in the game, black wins easily. The problem is that what if white plays ultra aggressive? In the game, Sarah has played h4, and that was absolutely the vital tempo that black needed to gain an advantage. And had she played rook e1, yes, very good. Again, we were looking, so our main line, and we'll come back to this g6 move in just a moment, our main line had been g5 check, which looks the most attractive. So white has no choice but has to move her king to g4. And now it's black's turn. Like black tries to bail out and plays a weak move like knight a6. Well, then after rook takes g5, pawn takes, king takes, white's not only won her pawn back, but if you notice, this knight on f5 is in a dominating position, and this knight on a6, pardon me, has been corralled, for want of a better expression, corralled. So we like white's position very much, so black really doesn't have any choice other than in this position to play h5 check. Okay. So cool. h5 check. So white's losing her piece by force. But king takes h5, rook takes f5. Here we pause. Here we pause. Because if we're white in this position, and it is a very important thing, is we need to learn to use our ability to calculate. Okay, so instantly, your first absolute instinct right out of the box in this position ought to be to play king g6. That should be the overriding instinct that you have. When you play the move king g6, you put the kings in opposition so that any back-rank check is checkmate. So king g6, not only do you put the kings in opposition to one another, but how sweet it is. You get the benefit of attacking the rook. She had seen the move king g6 as basically her best and only option, and then after rook e5, she had dismissed the line, which was very, very, very unfortunate, because king g6, the first move that should be your first move, your instincts should tell you king g6 is the best move, rook e5 is the showstopper. Very unfortunately, she didn't consider the line rook e8. So once again, we're going to look at rook e8, king f7, rook e1, and sorry, Sam, what variation did you wanted to play rook e5, yes? You didn't want to play g4 check, right?
We looked at both. Eventually, I think we looked at rook e5 first.
Right. Okay. So we were looking. Just a second. Let's just show you one of the variations we were looking at too. And if I recall, your original intention was to play g4 check, right? With the benefit of hindsight, do you think that check was your best, or would you have played?
Rook e5 is a draw.
Is it? Wonderful. Please tell us why, or please tell me.
That whole line.
Okay, so we go. Yes?
Rook c8,
Yes.
e5.
Correct. New variation, yes. King,
g5,
yes.
b4.
Not a5, but b4. b4, yes.
It's the same thing. c4, h4,
Yes.
a5,
Yes.
a5, h5,
Yes.
king g7.
Here you want to play king.
h6, king h7, king f6, or g4, a4.
How could white not be winning by playing g6 mate?
That's what I'm trying.
Yeah, good try.
b3, correct?
g5, rook a6,
Correct.
rook b3,
Those pawns are tough.
We take a pawn, I suppose.
a3.
Yes. Those pawns are tough. Wow.
if we take the knight and play g6 and rook a8, that's probably a draw.
Yeah, I think on
Take a2, g6 check.
but I can go play d6, rook takes d6, rook takes d8.
I'm sorry, Sam, do you say you have
Oh,
something?
d6 first.
Just not rook d6.
Okay, in this position, it's it's black to move, right?
I'm sure he's
Okay, how about one more time?
No,
If-
I like takes and then rook takes and then you can play d6. Take the knight,
d6.
a2, and then d6.
Okay, now I'm threatening mate in one.
Yeah, and if you take it, then rook a8. Then I like white.
Whoa!
This is too hard.
So even with the benefit of Sam having hindsight and working with chess engines and stuff, again, you just saw how we got drawn deeper and deeper. This was the last round with the U.S. Junior Championship at stake, and we're ending up, totally infatuated with this game.
And Sam was wanting the point to win the whole thing, correct?
Pardon me?
And Sam, if he won the game, he wins the whole
Sam
tournament.
did win the game.
Yes, Sam ended up winning the game,
Daniel won.
but Daniel won. He needed help from Robert Perez to make him the U.S. Junior champion.
So, yeah, so g4 check.
So we're going to go back to this position, and your original intention was
g4 check.
g4 check.
Then g4. Rook
Okay.
g5.
Yes. Oops, not there, but there.
Yeah, but this.
Okay.
h4.
And now, yes. So
Rook d5. I didn't really go into king h4. I only looked at king f4, rook d5.
right, I remember. So here there's a wonderful trick by black. So black's wonderful trick was that this move was kind of outside of his consciousness, and he was more focused upon the normal keep the centralization. But now rook e5 is a
Here, rook 8 takes e5, I think king d5, king d6.
it's a horse of a different feather, because white wants to keep this pin, but unfortunately his king is in check, so he ends up having to take this pawn. But now there's another strange variation, which Sam just mentioned, which went takes, 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 with the idea that when the knight goes to a6, well, suddenly the knight is corralled in another way. And by the way, in this case, there's 3 connected pass pawns, and they sure look good, right? Over here.
Yeah, that's why I have to go king d7.
Okay, so we're going to go back.
No, king takes e5, king d7, d6, king f7.
So king e7, new main,
Still theory.
still theory. So
King f5 check.
that's right, king f.
It's very scary for king d6, h4.
Right. Once again, we have some variation that may look a little bit like this, but h4, and it looks to me like white's just simply too fast. White.
White has to go king f2.
So, but maybe in this position, so you're saying that even after your trappy,
g5, black has a slight edge, but both sides have to play really accurately.
really, and what was the line after king h4, Sam?
Rook takes d5.
Rook takes d5, and can't white weave a mating net of some sorts? Check,
Yes.
king,
Rook g8 check.
or do we start with g4?
Rook g8 check.
Rook g8 check first is the best?
King f5, g4 check, and rook f7.
Oh my. Now we also have ideas, evil ideas like g5 too. What's your view? Should this be very good for white then? Sam?
I think the other rook should go to the f file so that it's made.
Uh,
Instead of rook f7, rook f8.
f5.
Sorry. So rook g8 check,
Looks like a root there.
king here. And what should I do, Ben?
I'm saying g4 check, king f4, and then rook f8.
Yeah, but now I have rook d6 or f5.
f5, g5, I'm supposed to
Knight
be
c6.
I'm still not free.
Knight c6.
Still not free.
It's
G-pawn's really strong.
a very strong g-pawn.
Hmm?
I lost.
I have
But
value and rook F7's gotta
okay, just come back to this position for a moment,
be. My
because
opinion is white's just winning all this stuff. I'm sure that's what Sam wants to do.
is that kind of your
The rook
feeling
and knight,
that this rook and knight is just so terrible? No.
Well,
The-
this is a bad night. When you take computer and you look at it, it's so different.
Yes.
It's so nice.
So again, so this is a strange kind of tale.
It's
That-
incredible how bad white's position got after she played h4
Right.
instead of this.
Right. So we're going back to this position, and who would have thunked it that when our initial reaction, once again, when we saw the move Queen F3, was bordering on euphoric. We kind of thought, wow, Sarah, she's ignored our advice to play A3. She's played her moves relatively fast, okay. She's prepared this position, and we can see that with the move Bishop G5, she is going to be dominant. Then, because we didn't see Sam's refutation, it was sort of like, oh,
Knight takes e4 here. It's the strongest.
what a clever move. New variation. So maybe your Queen E7 was the inaccurate move?
Well, black can always draw after knight f5 with rook e8, knight d6, rook e7, rook h4.
Black can always draw? Really? Okay, so the point was that when we saw Queen E7, again for the first time, Ben and I's reaction was, oh dear, that refutes Sarah's setup because of this knight D2 fork. And then we saw this whole piece sacrifice. We're getting more and more and more enthusiastic. But you're saying that maybe your Queen E7 was wrong, and that maybe knight E4 was more...
E7 by computer, it's a draw.
Oh, you're saying that in this position, your move Queen E7, according to the computer, that this ends in 0-0s or draw. But your computer is suggesting to you that had you wanted...
Look at it with computer, I'm sure it's...
was knight takes e4. So if you could recall for us what...
Knight f6.
This is white's best move, is knight...
Yeah, white should.
Okay.
Queen takes f6. Queen f6, g f6, bishop f4.
Okay, first impression is this knight... Oops, sorry. Was the knight stood badly. Knight...
White's problem here is if you play g3, I play rook e4. And if you play f3,
G3, rook e4,
and if you play f3, I can play d6.
and if I play f3, new variation, the idea you can play d7, d6. Wow. Wow.
It's still not that clear, but of course black is pushing.
Okay, because you're a pawn up. Fantastically intriguing variations. One of the first things again, like that experience of just the rook and knight being pinned on the back row. Yeah, the rook and knight being pinned on the back row. Man, when that happened to me, I felt so physically helpless. I was like pinned on the back row. When I see such structure, Sam, the first thing I look at is black's king. And I understand this move, bishop f4, very, very much. Because basically your idea is you want to dominate this knight so that after it comes to a6, it's corralled. Man, that might be my word of the evening. But when I look at black's king, my first instinct is bishop h6, because I think in my mind's eye, all I got to do to checkmate black's king is to play h4 and rook h3.
It's not that easy.
How would you defend the white idea?
Okay, d6,
d7, d6, h4,
knight d7,
knight d7, rook h3,
king h8,
king h8. So I go rook g3,
rook g8.
and you're in time to stop bishop g7 and
Well, you
checkmate.
should take rook takes g8.
I should play rook takes g8. Yes?
Yeah.
That's the best?
Rook takes g8 or rook takes g8
Okay, as you like.
or rook e1
Okay, so I've got evil intentions, yeah.
and knight e5.
Okay.
And the problem is white's, now white's bishop is in conflict.
Now, yeah, this knight on e5, oops, sorry, this knight on e5 became boss. So unfortunately, the desirable bishop h6, it's not that easy. Okay, so we go back to this position for a second. I'm wondering about the combination of the two ideas. So imagine I were to begin with h4 first. You would probably play d6. Pardon?
Rook e5.
Sorry.
Rook e5, rook h2.
Correct.
Okay, d6.
d6, yes. Okay. So now I am trying to combine the two ideas. So I play rook.
You said we're supposed to develop our pieces in the opening.
I did. Well, okay. This was just an aberration. I mean, I didn't like the king on f. Oops, I didn't like the king on f.
Specifically because I knew her king got, she likes positions, very solid positions.
Right.
I could have chosen a position with the king got e1 castle, and it's still fine for black because black's up 110.
Right.
I chose her king got f4.
Well, also, you were in an awkward situation because essentially the tournament standings were such that you need to win with black. So you have to take risks of some sort and to get her out of her comfort zone. So I understand. And it just turned out that this game was one of the really interesting and complex games where it's rather rare that just right out of the opening, everything seemed to be turned into a combination. And the entire variation
One question.
hinged on one tempo. Yes.
One request.
Yes.
The double-edged game.
Yes.
Do you see the actual finish?
Of the game.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the finish was a true anticlimax. So instead of capturing this pawn, which was super desirous, Sam played rook c5, king d5, king takes, rook here, check, here, here. And Sarah could actually resign at this point. I'll just say that she played on a little bit too long because, again, her rook is, she's playing essentially the game a rook behind at this point. She can do nothing, and this is where she stopped. So with this victory, Sam took clear silver, second place in the tournament. By the way, let us applaud you, Sam. Wherever he was, out he went.